What's good, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. Now, my goal, as always, is to give listeners a variety of perspectives and insights from sales leaders who have a proven track record of exceeding expectations for themselves and or their teams. Realizing, of course, that not one person has all of the answers. It's your job to take the aggregate of this information and to become better. And like always, the J. David Group is sponsoring this podcast. My company, of course, helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. Go to the jdavidgroup.com/hiring to learn more, or go to the .com/looking if you're looking for your next big challenge. Now, my guest today is a good friend of mine. I've known him for close to 15 years, I believe. His name's Pete Oliver. He's the president of Sailfish, which is a Sandler Training franchise that provides sales and management training and consulting. Pete and I met when I was working at my first company in recruiting. Actually, I won't give the name, but nevertheless. And he helped us with our sales. And then I was a member of his President's Club for quite a while down here in Massachusetts. He's now in Hawaii, but I believe still holds ownership in the Framingham franchise as well. One other thing before we get into it, I should mention that his franchise is a perennial recipient of Sandler's Diamond and Pinnacle Award, awarded to less than 10% of all franchises. Pete, good to see you, and welcome to Over Quota.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for doing this. So let's just start with what I just ended with. Talk to me a little bit about your Sailfish, how you help people, and how do you become a Diamond and Pinnacle Award winner? I'm curious.
Yeah. Actually, we just received the Summit Award, which is a level higher than those two, and it basically is revenue. It's revenue levels for our franchise, and in order for us to get any of those levels, it means we're helping a ton of people get better, helping a ton of clients. And so that's that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So how do you help your clients? Tell me a little bit more about Sailfish, or for those who don't know.
Sure. So basically we help companies with sales execution. So whether it's from a leadership perspective or a rep perspective, we want them to engage with their clients and prospects and execute that process with as little friction as possible. So we help them implement sales methodologies, sales management methodologies to make their team more successful.
And let's just back up for a moment. Bring us into the Pete Oliver backstory. Talk to me about your early career and then how you transitioned into this sales training.
Yeah, I was a Sandler client. I was lucky enough to get introduced to Sandler when I was early in my technology sales career. And I was a BDR at the time, and in a 2-week onboarding process with my company, and I got 3 days with a Sandler trainer. And at that point, I already had a bunch of other systems, and I fell in love with Sandler. I thought it was going to help me out a ton. And I spent 9 years with that company and worked my way up into account executive positions, management positions. And with the 9 years I was with that company, I just saw that myself and my team was more successful by leveraging the system. So I decided to leave that organization and buy 1% of a Sandler franchise 11 years ago. And, and then over time, we ended up buying. My wife and I are in this business together. We ended up buying the rest of that first franchise, and then we expanded because we had a dream to live in Hawaii. So we bought the Hawaii franchise, thinking that we were going to end up kind of retiring here, but we just got impatient and moved about 10 years before we thought we were gonna. And we've been out here for 18 months now.
I remember when you put that on Facebook or something that you had moved to Hawaii. I was shocked, but thought that was really cool. Do you remember when I'm asking this question because on your podcast, by the way, Emerge on Purpose, you talk about how sales reps can transition and go from individual contributor to management and some of the struggles that they have and really dive into that. So I want to go back to when you made the transition from individual contributor to manager, and just what that was like, what you remember about that.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember it. Sometimes it's a positive memory. Sometimes it's in my nightmares going from a rep to a manager. But for me at the time, I was about 28 years old. And then all of a sudden I was put in this position where I was managing $100 million in software revenue with 20 reps, and 2/3 of them were older than I was at the time. So I had to figure out a way to make that jump. And when I was their peer a week prior, and all of a sudden I'm the manager. And lucky for me, I had a great set of mentors, and my team was awesome. And I learned just as much from them as I think they probably learned from me and the rest of our organization. So it was very challenging. And it's funny, just a couple of weeks ago, I made a list of all the things I didn't know how to do when I became a manager. And the list was so long that it's amazing that I was able to get through that first year. Like, I'd never hired anybody. I'd never given a performance review. I never had to do a formal one-on-one coaching session. Never had to manage a pipeline. The list goes on and on and on of all these things that I had never done. And I'll tell you, you learn real quick when that happens.
Did you actively seek becoming a manager, or was it something that someone had come to you and said, do you want to do this? What was that like?
No, I wanted to do it. I thought early on in my career, when I was in college, I thought maybe I would become a coach or a teacher. And I always enjoyed helping other people accomplish whatever it is they wanted to accomplish. So that's what led me to wanting to become a sales leader. And that's what led me to buying into the Sandler business as well.
So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned mentors. What do you remember early on that you learned about from your mentors? And were they mentors that you actively sought out within your organization, or were you lucky enough to have them as your direct, people that you were reporting to directly?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. A guy you know pretty well, George Donovan, was one of my early mentors in my technology sales career and in Sandler. When I bought into that Sandler Training franchise, I bought in with George and partnered up with him. So he was a huge mentor for me throughout my career. Probably had the single most impact on my success over anybody in my career. And I mean, he taught me a lot. He taught me, my favorite advice he ever gave me when I joined the Sandler business, he's like, P, I don't care what you do, just go lose $1 million as quick as you can. That's what he told me. And then I'm like, what are you talking about, George? He goes, just make sure your close percentage isn't 0 and do it fast and you'll be fine. So I'm like, okay, that sounds good. I'll go do that. And I started tracking my losses. And that was how I got started with Sandler, was making sure that I had a velocity of losses that allowed me to win quicker.
And that was the thought process behind there? In other words, if you have a velocity of losses, you'll be able to learn at a speed, right, rapidly. And then as a result of learning, you'll be able to figure it out faster. Yeah,
I mean, I think that was George's way of saying failure is part of success. And really the only way you don't succeed is if you do nothing. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're moving forward and learning from your mistakes, you're going to be successful. And I've seen that in my career with reps that have reported to me too, is that action is what's going to create success regardless of the outcome. And over time, the outcomes start to become more in your favor. But the only way you don't succeed is by sitting on your hands, basically.
Would you say that's the biggest prohibitor to success? And if so, what are some others when it comes to specifically, I guess, moving from individual contributor to manager?
The biggest gift Sandler's given me is the success triangle. And whenever I look at people's ability to achieve success, it's really 3 things. It's their mindset, attitude. So do they have any self-limiting beliefs? Do they have any head trash that's getting away? Any comfort zones stopping them from moving forward? Mm-hmm. That's probably the biggest bucket, because that does impact the second bucket, which is your behavior. It's your actions. It's your goals. It's your plan. It's your actions. And those 2 together, working in a positive way, will create success. And then the technique will follow, which is the third point of the triangle, the success triangle. So whenever I'm coaching my clients and folks that I work with, that's where we start, is what are those three areas, and how are they either helping or hindering your ability to move forward?
Is there one of those three behaviors, actions, or techniques that you end up finding you need to spend the most time on, or that people have the most trouble with?
Well, it's there. Obviously, you think sales training and you think about the technique side of things. So how do I prospect effectively? How do I move a deal throughout the sales process? It's basically the execution piece, which is the how-tos.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that would be the most important element. But if your behavior isn't there and your head isn't in the right place, then all the technique in the world won't matter. So we tend to focus a lot on the A and the B, the attitude and the behavior first.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that that's in a supportive place. And then we layer the technique on top of it. And that's how we make ourselves and our reps successful.
Is it safe to assume that the actions are essentially a byproduct of the behavior and attitude?
Yes, the actions fit into the behavior bucket for sure. Yep.
What behaviors do you see, I guess, in most successful individual contributors who have made that smooth transition to go from individual contributor to manager? Can you be specific about those in terms of what you've seen, whether they be soft skills or well, I guess behavior is all soft, but.
Yeah, it's part of why I started that Emerge on Purpose podcast was to learn from people that have done it successfully. And I'm hearing some great answers about how to make that transition. Just last week, I interviewed a sales VP at HubSpot, and she was talking about making sure that she understands what motivates the people that work for her. And that's one of the biggest pieces of coaching advice that she gives her new managers is just make sure that you know what their motivators are and what success for them means and looks like, and don't assume that they're going to be motivated the same way you were, which I think is a big mistake that a lot of new managers make, is they assume that the people tick just like they do, and they don't necessarily. It's not always the case.
And what about, would you say are, some of the things, I guess, now in terms of the certain level of skills and techniques that they need when, let's say, somebody's onboarding somebody new now and they've been remote during this period of time? How do their behaviors need to change, or and how do you even look, I guess, if you're a manager, look for those behaviors in people when it is when you are remote?
Yeah, I live in Maui right now, so my whole life is remote. I get up at 4 a.m., help my clients between 4 a.m., noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I think there's some mindset things that need to happen there. Here, hold on a second, Jay.
Sure.
I had to shut the door. That's one of the things about working from home. You got to remember to shut the door behind you so the 7 and 8-year-old don't come running in, or the dog or whatever. But I love the Zoom concept and making sure that we're all turning our cameras on and we're being as present as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. And don't hide behind the phone. Make sure that you can get some sort of physiology by leveraging a video conferencing capability. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say too is you want to stay extremely consistent with your communication plan. If you set a team meeting, then do the team meeting, right? Because the only thing we can do is live on our calendar right now. If everybody's virtual, it's not like you can just knock on somebody's office and go in and talk to them. So we have to make sure that our communication plan remains consistent and we're doing what we say we're going to do, whether it's one-on-one meetings or team meetings.
Somebody else had mentioned that to me as well, in terms of the consistency and having a consistent communication plan. What is the downside to not having a consistent communication plan? Share some of that with us.
Well, one of those leadership principles that people talk a lot about is being consistent. So that consistency will add to the trust factor. And if you can show that you're consistent in pretty much anything you do, so you do what you say you're going to do, the communication plan is a huge piece of that when you talk about managing your people. If you devalue your time with them, then they're going to devalue their time with you. And it becomes this downward spiral, and it's hard to get positive momentum if you can't trust each other. And when you're working virtually, the communication plan is a big part of that.
I know you had, I believe it was something that you posted, it was like last week. And by the way, we're recording this on June 8th. It'll be published probably sometime in July, because I release one of these every Monday. But I know you hosted a meeting about what's management execution framework. Talk to me about what that is.
Yeah, so our clients, obviously the two groups of people that we work mostly with are either client-facing reps or managers. So when we're working with our managers, we want to give them the how-tos. And last week it was how to expand your reps' comfort zones in a purposeful way. And we'll talk about how do you get out of supervisor mode and into coach mode, or how do you take the Sandler upfront contract and use it in a one-on-one meeting with your team. So I think a lot of consultants out there tend to be kind of conceptual, like you really should be doing this, or this strategy will help your organization, but there's no how-tos. That's what Sandler's all about, is giving our reps and our managers the how-tos. And that's what that process is.
And can you give me a sense of what that might look like when, let's say, for instance, we talk about, I don't know, I mean, something that we just talked about, how to make sure that you're communicating properly with your team, or communicating even consistently? Like, what might that look like from an execution perspective?
Yeah, okay. So some of it is, for example, managing your calendar effectively and making sure that you're compartmentalizing out the different areas of your manager's day. Mm-hmm. So you can react to stuff all day long, but are the proactive elements of your calendar purposeful and on there? So that would be more of a strategy one, where you're making sure that your time slice for staying proactive is in a space that is going to help you grow your business. Like a little tactical one, record every single Zoom meeting that you do, and record every single client conversation that your team has, so that you can then leverage that conversation to execute your follow-up steps to be in the best interest of your client. And you can leverage that as a learning experience between you and your rep. Leverage that in your team meetings, and then use that to help you move forward. I think a lot of us don't record because we're worried about hitting the button, but in the reality is right now everybody hits the button, so it doesn't really matter. Just hit the button and get the things recorded. So that would be an answer, an example of a tactical execution.
Hitting the button sort of goes back to what you were saying about the velocity of failure or whatever it is, right? To sort of just do it, take that action, right? Makes sense.
Absolutely.
What percentage of one's calendar should be set aside for proactive activity as opposed to reacting activity? You have any insight into that?
Yeah, it's a question I ask other leaders all the time, and I've heard anywhere between 20 to 30% on the low end, mm-hmm. up to 50, 60% on the high end, meaning that's the on the business activity where you're doing your goal setting, you're doing your planning, you're doing internal coaching meetings, things like that would fit into that bucket. Mm-hmm. I think if you would think you'd want 100% in that bucket, but if that's the case, you're probably sitting in the corner office, not too in touch with what's actually going on, because you're not reacting to what's going on in your rep's world. Mm-hmm. So you got to leave time for that too. And you want to stay in either the important and urgent bucket, or the important and not urgent bucket which would be that proactive on the business activity. So I would say 20, 30% low end, 50% high end is the sweet spot.
What about, when someone goes from an individual contributor role to management, and let's say obviously, let's say they were a high performer, how does one start to help their team drive the same result, right? Because for me, that's always a struggle, right? When I started the J. David Group, I was just thinking, okay, well, I can just get 5 or 10 other people to do exactly what I'm doing, and I'll just teach them exactly how to do it, and they do it. This will just be a fantastic organization, but it's never that easy. And so I would imagine individual contributors who are high performing probably think the same way, which is naive. How do you actually, from a leadership perspective or management perspective, drive those results through other people?
It's funny. It's probably not the way you would think. I think a lot of reps, and I'm hearing this from the VPs that I'm interviewing in my podcast too, is when you get that promotion, you think you need to turn into the super rep. So in your old job, you were great at what you did. In the new job, you want to do it for every single rep in your territory and do it for them the way you did it. And it creates a bunch of problems. The biggest one is it creates learned helplessness. So nobody can really do anything unless the manager tells them how to do it. So instead of them thinking for themselves and then creating their own path and then you guiding them down that path, you're actually doing it for them, and it creates a problem because you run out of bandwidth and then they don't tick the way you tick. So they do it. They could have got to their destination in a better way if they did it their own way with confidence. Mm-hmm. So that's what you don't do. You don't turn into the super rep. I was interviewing a guy a couple of weeks ago, really successful sales VP. He had just made the leap into his first manager role. This was probably 10 years ago. And his manager now called him in and said, "Hey, Cody, you were a good rep, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I was a good rep. I was a good rep." He goes, "You know why you're a good rep?" He goes, No, because I stayed out of your shit." It's like, you got to stay out of your reps' shit and let them be good reps. You can't do everything for them. And that was it. That's Cody's like, yeah, I guess he's right. I guess I do need to do that. So I got to give them space. Now you can give them lanes, but you just don't have to drive the car for them. Right. And I think that's the best way to promote success on your team is make sure the lanes are extremely clear, but you allow your reps to drive their own car.
How do you do that? Like, what does that look like when I'm clearing a lane, right? Enabling success, if you will, right? That's a big word that I think applies to so many aspects of life. But how do you enable that so that there is that lane and they can be successful within that lane? So you're giving them the space.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll give a couple of tips that I've heard recently from some other sales VPs. One is make sure you have your quote unquote sales manifesto in place. My podcast, George Donovan, talks about that sales manifesto, which is basically your guiding principles. Like make mistakes is one in his world. So you want a culture that's going to try new things and learn from it. So that's a lane. It's okay to make mistakes, right? And another one that I hear a lot, and we work with our clients on this constantly, is making sure you understand your people's why. So, we as leaders, we obviously have our why, which is hitting quota and making sure we have a 3X pipeline and all this stuff. But that isn't necessarily consistent with your team's why. If they're picking up the phone for a reason, what is that? Do we know what's motivating them? Have we executed that vision board concept with our teams, and are we clear on what motivates them? Because the lanes will give you the journey, but we also want to know the destination, and that's what the vision board will give you. So that's been huge in my world too. The vision. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here with this background right now if it wasn't for that vision board process that I've gone through personally.
His background, by the way, is the mountains in Maui. That's that background. It's quite a vision.
Yeah, that's the view from my house. But
yeah,
that was a picture. But
same
one I took.
That's right. Put it up there. Right. Exactly. You can take the picture from your house. You can put it up there. You mentioned motivating. That's something big too, as well, right? And that's a little bit of what I was getting at with driving results and driving success from a leadership or management perspective. Given that folks are motivated differently and they have different motivations, right? Everybody has their why. What's, in your opinion, and some of the conversations that you've had, are the most effective ways to uncover that motivation and then, and then motivate, right? Motivate effectively.
Yeah, I think a couple of thoughts there is this is definitely one of those you want to lead by example. So if your own motivators are visible to yourself and your people, and you share with them what motivates you, and what success to you means, and how teaming will create more success for both of us, and you share your side of that equation, and it's easier to ask your team to share some of those thoughts with you. And I think it's important. Like, the questions I'll ask my clients and people that I work with are, when you tell me what gives you energy, tell me what success is going to look like from you 1 year, 5 years out. Tell me what motivates you personally. You know, where do you see yourself? Who do you want to be around? Questions like that, which basically put your mindset into like a desired future state, and then understanding what that means. I've had a client, so many stories about this over the years. One of my favorite ones, I've got a client, and she put on her vision. She had a relationship with her family early in her early adult life that was very strained, and she had left her house in her late teens and had a very strained relationship with her parents, and over the years it became repaired, but she had it in her thoughts that she wanted to help her parents retire early, and she saw them living on her property, and she saw herself building a house for them. And a year after she put it on her vision board, that happened. She built the house, her parents retired, they moved in. Now they're a real tight-knit family, where they were very they struggled earlier in her adult life. So to see that happen and see her accomplish that personal vision was huge. Obviously, it has nothing to do with selling software, but that was one of those drivers that were in the background that allowed her to be successful.
2 follow-up questions to that. Regarding the vision board, is that a literal vision board? In other words, a picture of Hawaii goes on the board, a picture of the land that she wants to build, or build upon for her parents, on the board? Or is it just something that's written that's on a board and you call it a vision board? I guess it's different, but tell me what your experience is.
Well, as long as it means something to you, it can take on different canvases. I've been doing this business long enough. In the old school days, we got the magazines out and cut out pictures and words and put them on a poster board. Now, new school, I pull up a PowerPoint slide and I drag pictures in, and I drag text boxes and words in, and it's done that way. But then I take that picture, and it's the screensaver on my phone. You can see part of it in the background there.
Mm-hmm.
It's on my computer. It's laminated. It's everywhere, so I can see it. Lisa can see it. We know what's on each other's vision board. My team, we all know what's on each other's vision board, and I try to get my clients to share it with me as well.
Very cool. The conversation around what motivates you, is that a transactional one-off conversation? And if not, like, if it is ongoing, how do you consistently, I guess, follow up and work that into the fabric, I guess, of management?
Yeah, I think it has to be called out, because you can't call somebody in for a pipeline review and ask them why they're chasing all their deals, and then at the tail end of that conversation be like, hey man, what motivates you? Like, this is not gonna work. It needs to have its own separate canister for the conversation. So you can do a team building exercise where the team puts their vision board together and presents it back to each other. You can do it during annual business reviews and make sure that part of that template for an annual business review has their personal vision board as part of that review setting process. Normally it can be done during a performance review or quarterly business review, but it needs to be called out, because that would sit inside that coaching mentor bucket. That's very important when you're a leader, is to make sure that you're spending time in those 2 buckets, and that whole vision concept would definitely be there.
It's safe to assume that motivations can change, right? Which is why you want to have it often as well, right? Because certain things might change, your visions, might change one reason or another, and to have that continuing dialogue is important, because then you'll know at least up to date as possible in terms of what's motivating them.
Yeah, absolutely. At least once a year, a couple times a year, maybe at least would be a good cadence.
Once you have that knowledge as a manager, how do you I guess, leverage that to motivate them, right? Is it just a reminder of, reminding them of why they're doing what it is they're doing every day? Remember, you told me that you wanted this, or your vision is this. You're not going to get that without that. Like, how does it work from a prescriptive perspective?
Yeah, you want to avoid the Ronco effect. Yeah, I don't know if do you watch any late night infomercials at all, Jay?
I used to, but thankfully not anymore.
You know the Ronco, the set it and forget it. You put the chicken in the thing, and
Yeah.
the whole audience goes to set it and forget it. Well, that's not what you do here. Like, you don't get somebody's long-term goals and vision and then never bring it up again. It's, you want to ask them on an ongoing basis, how's it going? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you have the resources that you need? How are you linking that long-term goal to your short-term actions? Can you see it? Is there any black hole in the middle? So we want to be asking questions all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much more satisfying to the rep and to the leader if you're asking questions that's consistent with their why versus our why. When we go to our reps and we say, hey, how come you only picked up the phone 20 times this week? That's what a supervisor would say. What a coach or a mentor would say would be to help me understand how your plan on a week-to-week basis is supporting that long-term vision we talked about. Is there anything you feel like you need to improve or get better at? From a behavior perspective, is that in alignment with what you think the results will bear for yourself? And you start to ask questions that is in alignment with their best interest, not ours. Our best interest is knowing how many calls they made, knowing if their pipeline is real, knowing if they actually confirm budget decision step. Like, that's our purpose as a leader, but it's not their purpose. Their purpose is to get to where they want to go. So if we know what that looks like, we can frame our questions in a way that makes us seem less like a supervisor and more like a coach and mentor.
Or, as I believe you'll say in Sandler, critical parent versus nurturing, right?
You got it. Yeah, we don't want to go into critical parent mode all that much as a leader. Hopefully never, if you can help it. Now, that doesn't happen, of course, especially with guys like you and I that have a lot of D in us. We might go critical parent every once in a while, but it's okay. It's okay.
I wonder, by the way, thinking about that transition from individual contributor to manager, do you find that a lot of new managers slip into critical parent supervisor mode as a result, because because that's what they think that's what a manager should be doing, like almost like a knee-jerk reaction? Or
yeah, I think there's a misconception about what a leader actually is, right? And yeah, we need to be a supervisor. We need to make sure our pipeline is clear and we're hiring people and managing people's performance, and all that is part of the role. But that's like basically you're managing current state, right? We need to get in an ideal state, and that's what the coach and the mentor do. And if we just stay in current state all the time, it's going to feel like we're that's like the definition of a micromanager is to inspect current state, right? And nobody likes that kind of manager. Nobody even likes to be that kind of manager, frankly. They just think they have to. Right. But the fact that you said have to is part of the problem. We want to get to where we want to go, and that's the ideal state, which means we have to go into coach and mentor mode quite a bit. And that's where all the value comes from for ourselves and for our people.
Let me ask you this, so I usually ask it for all of my guests who are VPs of sales, chief revenue officers, and so forth, but I'll ask it to you, just obviously given your experience and your expertise. But I'm going to ask two questions at different levels, right? So what are some of you can talk about behaviors, skills, traits, but what are the differences that you've seen in some of the best individual contributors that you've worked with in the past / managed, and then also at the managerial level as well?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer the rep question first. And I've been fortunate to work with some of the best sales reps on the planet. And I've been able to see what success looks like, especially in the technology vertical, but across a lot of different verticals. And I'll tell you that there's every rep has a different superpower. So it's funny, like you talk to some top performing reps and you ask them how they did it. You almost rarely get the same response, but then there's also some consistent traits that are always there. I think a big one is they have a growth mindset. They really want to win and they want to get better. I've unfortunately trained some people that aren't in that category too, and I call them the nice refresher people. Right? They may have been in the industry for 20 years, but they actually have had 1 year of experience 20 years in a row.
Interesting. Okay.
So they'll come up to me at the end of a training. They'll be like, "Pete, that was a nice refresher." And they're thinking they're giving me a compliment. But what they're actually saying is, "I should have been doing it already, but I'm not. Thanks for reminding me." So then they're going to go back and the same thing's going to happen over and over again. And they're going to have the same set of experiences year after year after year. So the really good reps, they constantly figure out how they're going to get better. The A players are the ones that are coming to me offline saying, "Hey, Pete, what would you do in this situation? I've got this particular client and I want to execute this. This is what I tried last time. It didn't work. What should I try this time?" And they've got an answer for how they're going to continually get better. So they have a growth mindset, not only with their clients, but their own personal development. And that's a trait that I see in every single rock star sales rep that I train. Right. Another thing too that has to be there if you're going to be a top performing rep is you need to find a way to get equal business stature with the people that you're talking to. And you have to call high. You have to believe you should be in the room. You have to believe that that particular client is lucky they picked the phone up. And that equal business stature mindset needs to be there in order for us to get trust with our clients. So those are two traits that are in every single A player rep we deal with for sure.
That equal business stature is one that I feel like we won't go down that path, but I feel like there's like a whole nother episode we could do just on equal business stature, right? And what that means and how to remove head trash and all that stuff. But we'll table that for another discussion.
Yeah. I assume you like that topic, Jay. I think you're the only guy I've done an interview with that has a voice deeper than mine, which makes it easy for you to get that equal business stature.
That's right. That's right. Although I don't have the view that you have. I have my bookshelf that I always try to, that's usually a pretty good stature builder, if you will.
We got the same haircut though. So
yeah, there you go. That's right. That's right. From management perspective, what is different when it comes to those soft skills, those behaviors, mindset type things that you've seen in managers that often separate the best ones from others that might struggle?
Yeah, I think the ability to, so as a rep, you actually have more control of your world than a leader does, believe it or not. So you think the opposite. You think you go into leadership, you got all this increased control. But when you look at the span that you have as a leader, your span increases, but your control over that span actually decreases. So if you're going to be a good leader, you got to learn how to delegate. You got to learn how to get the most out of your people, to identify strengths and weaknesses, to make sure that this larger span that we have has people inside of that span controlling what they can control versus us trying to control everything. And I think that's huge with a leader is figuring out how you can do that effectively, which a lot of people, that's basically delegation, but it's more complicated than that, right? It's easy to say, oh yeah, I got to delegate something, but it's harder to do it in a purposeful way that is relying on people's strengths, that has those lanes in place and the goals are clear. So the goal setting process for a leader has to be strong, has to be. So I'd put that in the top 5 too for leadership.
You know, it's what I get from there is just understanding what you can control and what you can't control, essentially, right? And then enabling to your point about lanes, right? Enabling what the individuals can control and doing your best from your perch, so to speak, to enable that, what their controllables are. And then obviously having everybody drive towards those shared common goals that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, a question I ask my clients all the time, and I ask myself almost daily, it's Sandler rule number 44, which is when your foot hurts, you're probably standing on your own toe.
Right.
So a lot of times we can blame the weather, we can blame the clients, we'll say things like, oh, they didn't have any money, or they didn't make a decision, or Well, is it really that they didn't have any money, or you didn't figure out what their pain was for them to decide that they wanted to invest to fix the problem? Like, which
Right.
side of the equation is it? So that rule number 40, it's an empowering rule to me, because it basically says that we're in control of where we want to go. We just have to determine which piece of that we can actually fix. So where can you take your foot off your own toe so you can move forward? Whether you're a rep or a manager, that has to be there. It has to be there, is to decide how you can help yourself, basically.
I feel like a lot of people conflate manager and leader. There's differences. I want to hear what you think those differences, what your definition of those differences are.
So there's basically three leadership roles, if you will. There's the supervisor, the coach, and the mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So you think supervisor, that's manager. That's the current state role. Whereas coach and mentor, that's future state. And that's when the leadership really comes into play.
I like how you just distilled that so clearly. It's awesome. All right. I'm going to have, I don't know if I had, other people that I've interviewed recently have gotten the rapid fire 5. I don't know if I told you about these rapid fire 5 questions, but essentially there are 5 questions that I'm curious about, that my listeners might be curious about, and that they just require quick answers. So are you ready for them?
Bring it on. Bring it on. Sounds like fun.
What is your favorite sales enablement tool?
The cookbook.
Tell everybody what that is.
It is their recipe to success. So they've decided this is their goal. Mm-hmm. And the cookbook is the link between their goal and their actions. So on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what are those actions that they need to do, those leading behaviors, if you will, that they need to do to satisfy the lagging results that means success for them. And it's having clarity around what they need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in order to become successful.
Maybe this will be the same answer, but I'll ask it anyways. What thing helps you stay productive and focused?
The combination of that and a very stringent goal setting process.
Okay. How do you stay motivated to achieve those things that are on your vision board?
It's being less comfortable with where I am and more comfortable with where I want to be. So, and that vision board is the tool that allows me to do that. And it's an extreme clarity around where you're going and having the plan to back it up that will allow you to take that journey in the best way possible.
What are you most excited about right now, either personally or professionally?
Oh, well, it's fun. We moved to Maui 18 months ago, right? And that was a life goal for us. And obviously it's not easy to go from Boston to Maui and sell your houses and cars and take your kids out of school and leave your family behind and go to a place that's 5,000 miles away with a completely different marketplace than we're used to, obviously, with Boston. So we accomplished that goal. And then my new marching orders became like almost by the day. It was like, I woke up every morning and said, discipline equals freedom. So I literally get excited about the discipline portion of my day, which is 4 a.m. until 1 in the afternoon. And then I equally get excited about the freedom portion of my day, which is picking the kids up from gymnastics this afternoon, or taking them golfing, or golfing with my buddies, or going to the beach, or paddleboarding with Lisa. And so my motivation has become like almost daily. And I love it, because I think in the past I got too weighted to the destination and I was too future driven, and I almost forgot to stop and smell the roses sometimes, literally. Now it's the hibiscus, but yeah. So for me, that motivation is staying disciplined so that I can go execute the freedom portion of my day and my week.
This isn't actually one of the 5, but I'm curious, what time do you go to bed at night to get up for 4 a.m.?
We put the kids to bed at 8, and then we do whatever for an hour, watch TV, read, whatever. And then my head hits the pillow at 9 o'clock.
Okay, cool. All right. So you're still getting a good amount of sleep, just a lot earlier than frankly I go to bed, but it's a different story. Okay.
Yeah.
And last one's an easy one. How can people connect with you, or to simply say thank you or seek more advice?
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn. Just Google Peter Oliver Sailfish or Peter Oliver Sandler Training. Find me on LinkedIn. Reference the fact that you saw me on the podcast, and that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is find me on LinkedIn. You can also on Instagram, we started an Emerge on Purpose Instagram page, which is where we're going to release our new podcasts on that topic to help reps evolve from rep to manager. So you can find us there as well.
And you're on all the, like, I searched your podcast in Apple the other day. I found it there. And I'm assuming you're in other places, maybe like Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify, and those types of things. So wherever people get podcasts, hopefully they'll be able to find your episodes, your podcast.
Yeah, you got it. We serve it up through Podbean, but it should go to all those major outlets for sure.
Fantastic. Pete Oliver. And by the way, I keep calling him Pete, but it is Peter, Peter Oliver on LinkedIn. Thank you for helping us all go over quota.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate you having me. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.